Good evening, listeners. Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Russ.
It's episode 39 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. I'm not feeling particularly mature tonight, but...
Why is that?
I don't know.
No
reason.
Okay. No reason, just not feeling mature.
I guess maybe I am. Yeah, it's
Gotta
almost...
put on some rock and roll. We're going to talk about only rock and roll tonight then, huh?
Oh. No, I think it's getting close to Christmas season, and the youthful...
That makes you feel immature?
No, the youthful joy of Christmas was long ago displaced with the, adult kind of
the
dread
bah
of
humbug feeling
bah humbug
Ebenezer
spirit,
Scrooge,
trying to buy presents and spending extra money and all that kind of stuff.
We picked the no swearing option on this podcast, and it's too bad because I had a good interjection in there that I now can't say because we can't swear. We're a family podcast.
Our clean rating.
Because we know everybody's family is gathered around the radio listening to us or whatever you listen to this on. Gathered around the device.
Gathered around the kerosene stove.
That's in Japan only.
In Japan.
Although who knows? Pretty soon with the new clean energy, everybody might be around. It probably won't be kerosene though. It'll probably be something else.
Yeah, I don't know.
Kerosene is probably one of the dirtiest kind of fuel.
Yeah,
I don't want that in my house. It smells really bad.
It smells really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
the kerosene stove, the kerosene heater, we should say, is a very popular, cheap way of heating your house in Japan.
Yeah.
But not for me. I don't have one of those.
Or the kotatsu, where
I don't like those either.
For a listener's not in Japan, and it's most of the modern ones are electric, although they actually used to have charcoal ones. But you put your legs
under the table, they'd be like burning charcoal under there. That seems really odd to me. I've never actually seen one of those.
So your legs get warm, but the rest of you freezes. So
not only that, but you have to sit around the table with the rest of your family, which would drive me crazy. Could I just go somewhere and be alone? I want to be warm. If you want to be warm, you got to stay with the family. Yeah. It's a table with a heating element under it, and it's placed on the floor. So you're sitting on the floor, on the tatami mats in Japan. There are no chairs around those things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not one of my favorite Japanese culture.
That was one of my least favorite Japanese things. In fact, speaking of least favorites, while we were sorry to hear that Stephen Sondheim died this week.
Yes, 91, I think he was.
91 years old, and he was one of the great writers of Broadway musicals, and he really just ruled Broadway in the 1970s. He did write probably my least favorite song of all time. In fact, I can't stand this song.
Oh.
Do you know what it is? You want to guess?
What?
I already told you. You already know.
Yeah, I know.
What is it?
It's Send in the Clowns.
Oh, I hate that song so much.
Yeah.
But
I don't like that either.
The clouds? Get out of here, man. Get out of here with that. And yet everybody sings it. It's like it's a great song, and it probably is kind of structurally and chordally, and as far as like song construction goes. But I don't know. I just don't like it.
Well, it's one of those songs that you couldn't escape when you were growing up. Back in the old days when all we had was radio,
right?
And when you were in the car or you were at home. And there was no Spotify, and you turned on the radio, you'd get bombarded with those same pop songs over and over again.
Right. But then again, you did know you were kind of hit with everybody. One of the good things about that, though, is that everybody shared this sort of culture. This is another good thing about TV and movies. One of the things that kind of drives me crazy about young people in general, really, but young people in Japan, is they just don't know anything about like movies older than the year 2000. It's whereas we saw movies way back to 1930, like the original King Kong and movies like that on TV, Casablanca. I mean, who under 30 has seen this movie? And yet we all knew them really, all those movies really well. They're classics. Now you got to teach classes on them.
Watch all those Robert Mitchum movies and like that.
Yeah,
well, there are some young people who are checking out older music now. And,
that's good. Yeah, from the 60s mostly.
And now that we're all grown up, we've got adult music. And, for you listeners.
And it's really happening, as it turns out. Jazz is really happening now, and classical is actually pretty interesting. They've dug up a lot of old stuff. There are new composers. We're getting composers from all over the world now. It's really fantastic.
And it's only a click away, but it can be overwhelming to decide what to listen to, what not to listen to. So that's why we're here every week bringing you 6 new recordings in classical and jazz, mostly, to give you something new to listen to each week and maybe figure out some new things. If you enjoy listening to us ramble on about our impressions of that. And boy, we've got a wide variety this evening, going way back in time, right up to modern times for this episode 39. Before we get into it, though, I'd like to remind you listening out there that in the episode description for all these recordings we'll talk about, you'll find links to Spotify and Apple Music so you can check them out on your own. And also at the top of the description, there's a full episode playlist on Deezer, and that has all the recordings in one big list you can listen to. You can also follow us on Deezer for the podcast at Adult Music Podcast. You get the podcast and also our playlists from our name there. Now, if you can't see the description with the links on whatever app or platform you're listening to us on, come over and check us out on our host site, Podbean, and everything is neat and tidy to follow over there. If you enjoy the podcast, please do follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you're listening to us on. And if you take a minute to give us a ranking or write a review, that helps us get listed in the browsing category for music commentary, and that helps more listeners find us, so we'd appreciate it. If you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com.
Yeah. By the way, before we get away from Stephen Sondheim, we should say something positive about him. He did write the lyrics to West Side Story, the Leonard Bernstein musical, right?
Yeah.
And he wrote Sweeney Todd, music and lyrics to that, as well as Company and a lot of other musicals from the 70s.
Right.
And a lot of great songs. Just I don't like Send in the Clowns. I think that's a real turkey for me. Up there with, speaking of Thanksgiving, up there with MacArthur Park, another song I really can't stand.
Yeah.
I never understood that Cake in the Rain line. I was like, what's that doing in there?
So very, very strange lyrics in that song. Yeah.
I know, it's a weird song. And it's also got this grandiose music to it. And the thing is, that's Jimmy Webb wrote that song. One of America's all-time great songwriters. He wrote Wichita Lineman and other songs, other great songs.
A lot of songs that I like, yeah.
Yeah, which is just that one, he kind of...
Who's that? That's Richard Harris, isn't it?
What, MacArthur Park?
Yeah, I think it is.
A lot of people sang it.
Yeah, but I think the actor Richard Harris sang that song in the famous recording. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. And I used to have a really crazy version by Maynard Ferguson, big band. The altissimo trumpet player.
Right.
Just scream over it. Yes. So. Yeah, but I haven't heard it in years, and now you've had to remind me of it.
Well, you should put that as a doubleheader. Send in the Clowns and MacArthur Park. That would... torture us both.
Oh, no.
So that's something for our things we hate list, because we want to make a things we love, things adult music loves, and things adult music hates list.
I think there is a podcast about that. Something like why this song sucks or songs we hate or something. That's too negative though.
I couldn't. You can make a list, but if you're gonna. I think it's bad for your spirit to complain about things every week, or every day maybe on a podcast. So. And you're putting it out into the world. I don't know, man. I mean, it's a funny idea, and I'm sure I'd be amused watching it, or listening to it. But I think it's bad. Too much bad karma.
Yeah, music should be edifying and uplifting. So
just ignore the stuff you don't like.
Exactly.
All right. All right, well, anyway, before we get to the classical releases, I just need to give the listeners a heads up. I have switched my adult beverage tonight because a friend gave me an early Christmas present. It's a bottle of West Cork single malt Irish whiskey, finished in a bourbon barrel. And it's nice and smooth and delicious, but it really packs quite a punch. This is a 59 proof whiskey. So if I suddenly drop out of the conversation in the jazz section of the program, that's why, because I have a lot to say about the jazz recordings today, which are really great. So if Russ might be doing a solo show by then. We'll have to see.
Try to keep you between the lines on the rails till the end.
I'll have to sit under the kotatsu or something, you know. I don't have one of those in my house, actually. I just don't like them. They're up there with MacArthur Park. And Send in the Clowns. Okay, so anyway, let's get going with tonight's recordings. First of all, I picked a Baroque recording to start out, and this one, you know, usually I like to start the day with Baroque music because it's cheerful. Well, this one is not cheerful. It's a vocal one, and that's really the only place you'll ever find like really kind of down or sad, Baroque pieces. The Baroque opera was really started in the Baroque era. The first operas were really started at the beginning of the Baroque era, and they were all although these are before that. These are from the Renaissance era. Yeah, so before that. But Baroque opera was all about emotions. So you had a lot of like dramatic and sadness and things like that. The Renaissance, the period before the Baroque, they were really into like the Melancholia. And in fact, this album is called Melancolia with no H. Okay, it's a Spanish word, not the English word. Okay, Melancolia, and this is by Música Temprana, Adrián Rodríguez van der Spoel is the artistic director. And I didn't write the label. Who's the label on this? Is this
Pentatone.
Glossa? Who?
Pentatone.
Pentatone, sorry. Boy, yeah. I got the wrong label. Pentatone. Didn't mean that. We love you too, Glossa. But, okay. We'll worry about that later. On the Pentatone label. All right, the booklet note is pretty edifying. They talk about the title referring to the melancholy felt at the loss of something important. Then they say, like one's life, although I don't know why you'd feel melancholy about that. I guess you'd be thinking about it in advance, and that would make you melancholy. The planet and culture, or the absolute, the loss of God, okay, which you actually can never lose. You could just kind of, I guess you could shut yourself off from it, though. Okay, so it says here, in 1475, Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon, who we know as Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, united their crowns and unified Spain by doing that. They were also responsible for sending Columbus to the Americas, as we know, and his discoveries began thoughts of the New World in Europe. That's kind of why we celebrate Columbus Day. There's all this kind of stuff about, oh, well, the Vikings really discovered America, or some Chinese guy did. But Columbus is important because this really started Europeans thinking about it. That's why he's the significant one, okay? The most important source of music at this time of great change was the Cancioneros Musicales de Palacio and the Cancioneros, or I guess you would say Cancioneros Musicales de la Colombina, which were both around the year 1500. And all of these works come from either one of those two books, or except for the last one, which comes from several sources. We'll get to that when we talk about it. Okay, so this is a vocal ensemble, and this is kind of a... melancholy is a good word. This is all really kind of mildly sad music. You know, you could, but if you mostly enjoy this if you light a candle in like a bare room with maybe one writing desk and a cot, and that would be the ideal listening environment for this.
I like this one a lot, though. I was listening to it almost every morning.
I liked it too. I didn't listen to it every morning, but I liked it too. But it's just kind of in the morning. I don't know. I think it would. I need something to get me out of bed. This would keep me in there. I think, though, it's not depressing by any means. It's
the lyrics are very interesting too. It's a mix of secular and spiritual things,
right.
And I found that. It's sometimes disturbingly sad things, but it sort of gives you, sometimes we think, oh, woe is us with all the things we feel in the modern times, but it sort of shows you the unchanged nature of man. Even in 1500, people were still having the same emotions, and expressing them through these kind of songs. So I found that very interesting. And then we get to look at a lot of Spanish, which we don't do a lot. So that was interesting too.
Right. Notice that I was thinking we should do this on. We're planning a Spanish episode in the future, and this would have been a good thing to have on that. But I think I wanted to do it because it was the months were passing, and I just wanted to get it on the show because I liked it. Okay. Well, anyway, one of the things about this is listening to. Well, I'll mention this at the end. I wrote a little note about it. Okay, let's go through the tracks here. We have, let's see, 14. More than that. We have 22 tracks, but really. 17 pieces. The last one is a it says that it's a multi-part work, but it's really just one very long work. Anyway, so you have 16 not very short, but one movement, there's songs basically, and then there's a long, almost religious setting at the end. Anyway, we start out with an anonymous composer writing a piece called A los baños del amor, to the baths of love. Oh, okay. This is a mournful. That's a good word for this whole album, really. Long, drawn-out, vibrato-less strings and winds on this. So you're not gonna get any vibrato because we're too depressed to actually make the string feel like it's alive. It's got a good mix, good arrangement, and gorgeous sound on this whole album. This is a really good sounding album. Do you think so?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. In the song here, the singer is going to the baths to cleanse himself of misfortune in love. Just wash it off you. This theme of love as a mortal wound is very popular. It's heard in a lot of later Italian works, and being Italian American, who's someone who's very interested in this whole era of Italian works, I know this whole sentiment well. And I think in all Latin culture, this kind of registers like this: love is a mortal wound. Okay, you've injured me, and I'm thrilled about it. This kind of thing. Okay, it's kind of the theme of these songs. Okay, number 2, Francisco de la Torre, Dime Triste Corazón, Tell Me, Saddened Heart. This is a chorale work, and it kind of sounds like a madrigal. It's sung in harmony. There's no counterpoint. It's all kind of like chords. And here the vocals claim that the lover being served is actually an enemy. You got to listen to the lyrics to understand. I'm not going to pick this apart. One of the things about this album that's really interesting is that the program, these works are all just songs. They're just written, the chords, the notes, the melody, and that's it. You don't know the instrumentation, so you could really use any instrumentation you want from the period. And this ensemble varies the instrumentation in each track in a way that makes it constantly interesting to the ear. So this one's a choral work. It sounds like a chorale, really, like a church work. The third piece, anonymous, Ojos, mis ojos, and this has a vihuela accompaniment. It means eyes, my eyes. Vihuela accompaniment. This one's actually kind of uplifting. It has an identifiable Spanish lilt to the melody. In this one, the singer marvels at her lover's eyes in the lyrics. So that's kind of nice. The work has a spare, still quality, and there's lots of space. And it ends very suddenly, too. I was kind of like, that's it? I don't know. Not a final chord. Fourth track, and also an anonymous composer, En Avila mis ojos. In Avila, Eyes of Mine. This has a plucked string and wind instrument as accompaniment. The singer recalls seeing a friend murdered. As do we all, I guess. I don't know. Melancholy indeed. There's a light feeling of despair in this work. It starts with a solo voice, then a gentle chorus comes in to assist. Boy. Do you think we have it bad, huh? I don't know. Anyway, Adrián Rodríguez van der Spoel, he's the conductor, so he's written this work for this album, and his work is called Melancolia, which is the name of the album. This is an instrumental, and it's the first of 2 he's composed for the album. It matches the style of the period, but the harmony suggests something later than the music that we're hearing on this album. This one has a plucked string instrument playing upward arpeggiated chords, as other instruments play long, drawn-out tones, and also has an inconclusive ending. So I feel like he's kind of copying the style, but he's a little ahead of this period, I think. It sounds more, I don't know, Renaissance, if not modern. I don't know. Track 6, Garcia Munoz. Una montaña pasando. And there's an instrument called a saranica on this. The title means When We Pass Through the Mountains. The chorus sings of the coming upon a farm girl. So they're like a group of people, and they come on a farm girl, singing about how the cowherd avoids her, and she may not see him again because the mountains are difficult to cross. There's a lovely vocal solo on this, and I'm guessing this is Luciana Cueto, the album's mezzo-soprano soloist. I think she gets all of the solo singing on this album. The choruses travel further and come upon another girl, grief-stricken because she doesn't want to marry. So she's sad because she's sad at being rejected, so she's never going to get married. So everybody's sad just for whatever reason. And I guess if you got married, you'd be sad too. So I guess the moral of the story is there's no avoiding sadness.
You just can't win.
Just can't win. Okay, next, track 7, Juan Ponce. Alia se me ponga el sol. Let the sun set. This starts with the vihuela. I love this instrument. It's a really kind of gentle sounding lute-like instrument. And then there are vibratoless strings accompanying very soon. A solo vocalist, who is Cueto, again, Luciana Cueto, sings of pain and resentment at rejection. Track 8, anonymous composer, Dentro en el Vergel a tre. This is an instrumental, and it's got a vihuela, strings, and winds. Also, an inconclusive ending. It just sort of suddenly stops. Track 9, Muchos van de amor heridos. Many have been hurt by love. Actually, I don't actually speak Spanish, so if I'm mispronouncing these words, I'm going by what I understand about it, so please forgive me if that's the case. This is a choral work with chords. There's no real counterpoint in this. Counterpoint was developing, but it wasn't quite at its it was actually at the Renaissance level, but it was reserved mostly for those big masses. These are more popular works.
Yeah, these are songs, really. I mean, they come off as songs, yeah.
Yeah. Track 10, Mojica, CMP. No queriendo was querida, even if you don't love me. So the lyric is basically about how the singer still loves the person he's singing to so much that he's happy in his suffering. Yeah, this is such a Latin sentiment, and and I know it's an Italian one for sure, but apparently a Spanish one and probably a Latin one as well. I think it started with the troubadours because they were always happy about suffering for their love for their women. Pedro de Escobar, Ojos Morenicos, which means dark eyes. This poor woman has surrendered to his love. This poor woman has surrendered to her love. And now his eyes want to kill her. The chorus joins in midway. They're great lyrics, really.
Yeah,
They're just kind of.
I really like reading the lyrics.
You have to kind of adjust your sense of reality to a different period here. Okay, anonymous. Dentro en el vergel, which means in the orchard. Vergel, I don't know how to say this. Vergel. A quattro. Instrumental, and a particular lovely one here. This is led by a recorder, and another instrument I really enjoy listening to, especially in this context. Next is by Juan Ponce. We've heard about him from him already. Como está sola mi vida? How lonely my life is. And this is a choral work. Going on, Garcia Sanchez de Badajoz. And this is called O Desdicado de Mi, which is Woe is Me. Another choral work, another being whose love is unrequited. If I don't explain what the piece is about, just imagine it's someone whose love is unrequited, because that's basically what all these tracks are about. Almost all. Track 15, Adrián Rodríguez van der Spoel, again, the director. This is called Dystopia, and it's an instrumental work. This sounds like a Renaissance guitar at the opening, I think he's playing it too. There's a Renaissance harp as well. It's melancholy in keeping with the theme, but the timbre is brighter here. And it also speaks of later times. I think van der Spoel's harmony really is... He's really past the this early Renaissance era. He's kind of into the later Renaissance, or even the Baroque era with his harmony when he's trying to copy this style. Track seats, no problem with that. It just kind of feels a little different, is the thing. But it lifts the mood a bit. Johannes Urede is next. Muy trista será mi vida. My life will be miserable. Hey, play it. My life will be miserable. Yeah. Make a request.
Send in the cloud.
Okay, and of course his life will be miserable because he won't see his lover anymore. Track, send in the clouds. Oh, man. Okay, anonymous composer, Santo Domingo de Silos. This is from a different source. This is from the Toledo Catedral Codice 25. This is El Canto de la Sabila versus Sibila Profete, and the Sabila is Luciana Cueto. It's presented here in 6 parts, but it's really one continuous, almost 30-minute work. And it's religious, so it kind of balances out the secular works on the album. In this one, the female voice, Luciana Cueto, who is the Sibyl, promises to teach this group of, I guess, priests singing a Gregorian chant, how God manifests himself. And the whole thing talks about, this whole 30 minutes talks about the Last Judgment. The Sibyl tells the priest how it will occur. And the parts all continue up until the end. There are also bells, as though it's a kind of church service. There are bells rung at certain divisions in the work. The music sounds like something you would hear at church in this period. This is a very quiet, very tranquil album. Good. It's very meditative, let's say. Mm-hmm. I needed to turn the volume up for this. Actually, it's that quiet. It's all gentle lamentations. They're sad, but not pathetically so, at least musically speaking. The lyrics can get kind of pathetic at times. Keep in mind, despite the timbre variety between the tracks, the tone of the album is all the same. It's all sort of down. The album's a downer, but not depressing. It's actually rather touchingly beautiful. The sound was of an individual isolated in a spacious bare cell, like a monk, meditating on misfortune. And I love that sound, so I really enjoyed this album, too. All this misery cheered me up. I felt better listening to this album. By the end, I was uplifted. The overall sound and programming made me overjoyed to hear all this misery. And that's what I have to say about it. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is I recommend this, so if it sounds kind of compelling to you, give it a listen. I think you'll enjoy it. It's really nice.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I wrote meditative too. I said all the music has a calming, meditative quality. Something about music from this period, pre-Baroque, the harmonies are very simple. They're rather open, right. And they don't take huge jumps. They have a simple quality, and the way they resonate, along with you can look at the lyrics, both the religious and secular ones are interesting, but it sort of gives you a human kind of tie to the emotions that go along with the lyrics. And as Mike said, the music is really cohesive over this. There's enough variety, but the overall mood and style, keeps you on this same general kind of journey through a little bit of sadness, but it's not a downer at all. It really will calm you down. So, I enjoyed it a lot, and I think it's an interesting listen.
It's one of those odd things where they say, like the blues, which is kind of always really sad music, but you just feel good when you hear it, right? It kind of purges you of something. Yeah. This music does that too. I felt really good. I felt like light by the end of this, listening to this recording. And also, it's an easy listen all the way through, simply because of the variety of timbral combinations that the ensemble uses. It was really very creatively done. Excellent. I liked it a lot. On the Pentatone label, Melancolia. Okay. Second, I had I've been sitting on this for a while and wondering if I wanted to do it or not. The British Project. And this is by the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, or I should say Birmingham, because we might have British listeners now. The City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Mirga Gražinytė-Tyla. And she's She is an up-and-coming conductor from Lithuania, and she made a big splash with her recording of Mieczysław Weinberg's Symphonies 2 and 21 about 2 years ago. She really kind of was the first recording to put Weinberg's music on the map, and now he's become like a very, very popular. There are a lot of recordings of his music suddenly coming out. He was a Polish composer from the 20th century. And so she's gone on. She's done other recordings, but this is the first time she's doing works that are firmly in the repertoire, or have been for a while. It's all... Now, she's conducting the Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, and she's Lithuanian, so she's decided to do an album of music for her new home, where she's now in Britain. And she says she loves British music, as do... Yeah, I do to an extent. We'll get more into that here. So what she's done is, the program is 2 one-movement works on the ends by 2 older 20th century composers, Elgar and Vaughan Williams, and they're kind of the bread in the sandwich that has multi-movement works by contemporaries Benjamin Britten and William Walton, who lived really in the mid 20th century, or the early, through the war years and all that. Anyway, the program starts with a work by Elgar called Sospiri, his Opus 7. It's an adagio for string orchestra, harp or piano, and harmonium or organ, ad libidinem in D minor. This is written in 1914 at the beginning of World War I, and it was premiered after Britain entered the First World War, so audiences expected something patriotic, and instead they got this. It's a short 4 minutes 50 seconds passionate cry of desolation and loss, as Richard Bratby describes it in the booklet note, in the Deutsche Grammophon booklet note. I should mention this is a Deutsche Grammophon release. I didn't write the record labels on my program notes. This is terrible. I gotta remember to do that, because we want them on board. They're important. They put this music out. Deutsche Grammophon album label of the year, remember, according to Gramophone. And the recording is spacious and warm, and the strings ring out in the higher tessitura, and the harp and harmonium register clearly in their softer passages. This is a beautiful recording. It's very, very clear. Like the big ensemble is easily, everything in the ensemble is audible. Okay, tracks 2 through 4 are the Sinfonia da Requiem by Benjamin Britten. This work has an interesting story, actually. Did you read about this? Do you know how this came about? You're going to love this. It's a symphony for large orchestra written in 1940. Okay, so there you go. World War II had started in 1939. It was written in 1940 as a commission for the Japanese government's celebration of the 2600th anniversary of the Chrysanthemum Throne. Oh. Which started with Emperor Jimmu. The government of Japan, now you got to remember, Japan hadn't fully entered the war yet, but they were already causing trouble in China at the time. And so people were aware that they were being a bit, shall we say, aggressive there. The government, they also commissioned works from some other famous composers of the day. They were really into Western classical music at the time. And there were a lot of Japanese composers that were commissioned for this. And some of the foreign ones were Richard Strauss and Jacques Ibert. And I don't know of any others, but those are the 2 I came up with. They didn't mention which work Strauss wrote for them, but Jacques Ibert's work is the Symphonie du Fête or something like that. It's something I've never heard, but it's said to be fairly bombastic, probably what the Japanese government wanted. Well, when the Japanese government received this work, they complained that it, quote, did not express felicitations for the 2600th anniversary of our country. So they didn't play it. They didn't like the fact that it was, first of all, it was a requiem, so kind of a mass for the dead, and also the 3 movements were written after the Christian Mass, or the Catholic Mass, which really had nothing to do with them. So they were thoroughly unhappy with this. It eventually received its premiere in New York in the USA the next year, 1941, I believe. Okay, so this was a pacifist message aimed at the Japanese government, who were already being belligerent, not only in China, but in Asia in general. And it actually forecasts some material that would be used in the War Requiem of 1962, one of Britten's major works. The whole thing started with the death of Britten's mother, and so he was feeling the remorse of that. And at the time, news of the Spanish Civil War and the rapidly escalating beginning of the Second World War were in the air. So the work arose from all of that. So it was both personal and it kind of expanded into the whole world situation. The first movement, Lacrimosa, and all these kind of attached to each other, these three movements. They're all played as one continuous thing. Again, all the titles come from the Latin Requiem Mass, the Roman Catholic Latin Mass, possibly even the Church of England one. I'm not sure how that goes. It starts with a percussive outburst, and then it grows very mournful, and this is the longest movement at 9 minutes and 29 seconds. I gotta say, the conductor, Gražinytė-Tyla, I gotta say, how many times I have to say this name? It's kind of hard to say. Holds the tension of this movement well, allowing the material to register as structural as well as local. So I was very impressed with her conducting in this and in the Elgar work. The movement builds up to a loud and intense climax. There's also a lament by the saxophone, very unusual scoring in this movement. The second movement, Dies Irae. Oh, who's not going to set a Dies Irae when they're doing a Requiem? This is the Dies Irae, the Day of Wrath. Usually a very dramatic movement. Just think of the Verdi Requiem if you really want to hear a solid, Latin, Mediterranean Dies Irae. This particular one starts with agitation in the strings. It's not very bombastic. Often they can be. The tempo speeds up as the strings set a galloping rhythm over squeals from various brass instruments and harsh wind combinations. Of course, in a Dies Irae, they have to be trumpets, and there's some impressive repeated note figuration in this. The brass are also called on to indicate the harshness of the Last Judgment, and we then hear the sound of a rapid march in the strings. All in all, this is more of an intentionally vulgar, rather than a traditionally awe-inspiring movement. All right, it's kind of
yeah, that giddy up thing in the strings is pretty interesting. Giddy up. Galloping, right? Yeah.
I think those are the four horsemen of the apocalypse, I guess. And the third movement, Requiem Aeternam, we finally get some rest. Eternal rest, Requiem Aeternam. This starts quietly and peacefully with a rocking melody in the winds, which builds to a sun-drenched climax midway through. It's as though God has intervened and stopped the carnage or brought us into a place of peace. It's actually a moving work, and Gražinytė-Tyla paces it expertly. So she's really, as a conductor, she's really at her peak here. The next work is by William Walton. It's excerpts from the opera. It's kind of a symphonic suite from his opera Troilus and Cressida, composed from 1947 to 1954. Now, Walton himself didn't arrange this suite. It's arranged by his collaborator, Christopher Palmer, and he did it in 1988. And I've got to say, I really would have preferred if Walton had done it himself, because I'm not so sure about the choices here. I thought this was kind of prosaic sounding. It didn't really build to anything. Anyway, the first movement, Prelude and Seascape, is the beginning of the opera, the Trojans. It opens with a massed invocation to Athena, and then evokes the birth of Aphrodite from the sea, which starts about 2 minutes in, and ends with some glittering orchestration. The scherzo uses music of the quick-witted Pandarus. This characterization probably comes from stories about him from the Middle Ages, because in the Iliad, Pandarus is a heroic warrior, and in Shakespeare's play, Troilus and Cressida, he's an object of ridicule, so here he lands somewhere in between. The music here is kind of light. It kind of gives you a lightness in his approach to life. Cressida's aria from the opera At the Haunted End of the Day is used as the central interlude. It's much slower. It floats along at a slower pace, and it's a sad lament. And the movement lightens up as Pandarus's material is reintroduced after the music for Cressida's aria. So it's an ABA form. Third movement, The Lovers, portrays Troilus and Cressida's doomed love. And it starts with a dramatic statement, then quietens. There's a dancey rhythm in the middle, but all these happy moments darken to a doom-laden stasis in the end, although it ends rather tranquilly. And finally, the fourth movement, our lovers are, of course, doomed. This moves from the captive Cressida's anguished lament to the opera's denouement. And it begins in a dark, quiet rumbling in the strings and timpani as an English horn plays Cressida's plaintive melody. There's an aggressive march, then we get another lament, and then we get the dramatic concluding music of the opera. The thing is, I didn't think this suite really worked as a piece, and that's why I kind of wish that Walton himself had arranged it, because he probably would have known, more how to pace the tension and release in it. It just sounds like it's excerpts from the opera, basically, just to me. It's heavy on Cressida's material too. Troilus doesn't even make an appearance here. I don't know what's going on with that either. Anyway, one of the reasons I wanted to hear this was for the last piece. Vaughan Williams's fantastic, absolutely must hear Fantasia on the theme of Thomas Tallis. Now, if you haven't heard this work before, I would recommend John Barbaroli's very old recording. That's still the best ever. I've heard other good ones too. This one, I gotta say, I didn't like as much. It's to me, this piece is worth the price of admission on any recording. Gražinytė-Tyla emphasizes the melody wherever it appears. The recording is clear, so the accompaniment can be discerned. There were some interesting balances that I actually really enjoyed quite a bit. And there's a bit of passionate fire in this particular performance. It has a sense of urgency you don't often hear in it, and I was kind of thrilled about that. But I'm not sure it's appropriate to this work. I think this work is more somber in its proper character than it comes across here. I wouldn't say it's overdone, but I do think that first of all, the dynamic range between loud and quiet is very wide. So you don't want to adjust your stereo volume by the opening, because you'll be pinned to the back wall by the middle.
You'll rarely hear such a depth of string sound as you hear on this. The arranging that Williams has done with the strings, it's a huge wall of sound in a very good way.
Right.
Especially in the lower strings, basically this work is all strings.
Right, yeah, it's all strings, and they're divided into three groups. There's a string quartet actually in the center, which is the smallest group.
But in the sections, it's just very impressive of the density of the parts as they move with the different layers of the strings. I was pretty impressed by that. Yeah. I mean, there are. As you say, they're individual string lines and things too, but in the orchestra score is really something special in this work, I think.
Yeah, at the beginning, I had a sense that the tempo was going a bit fast, and once we got to the string quartet, which is really just the most beautiful part of the whole piece, right in the middle, I thought they were playing a bit too fast too, because it's a really moving section, and I wasn't moved by it. So I was it's just because it's too fast. They're not really letting the feeling sink in before going on to the next part. And then they lose the somber, ancient sounding quality of this work, and it's part of that gives it its kind of sense of wonder. Tempo is extremely important in this work. From there, Gražinytė-Tyla keeps that tempo going to the end, and by the time we get to the big loud climax of those kind of parallel chords, the figuration gets blurred due to the fast tempo, and I feel like the climaxes are mistimed. Like they don't really just feel like that big release that you get that just makes me feel so good when I heard this. The uplift I usually get from this piece just didn't happen, and at the end, when we pass the climax, the arabesque-like accompaniment is accentuated against the main melody, which is a welcome touch. I liked that a lot, but I feel like the timing of the whole thing, if you're telling a joke, timing is everything. Well, if you really want to give the audience like a big kind of feeling, you gotta kind of pace the piece perfectly, and I feel like this one kind of climaxed too early, shall we say. I was fortunate enough to hear this piece for the first time at a live performance at the Sanders Theater at Harvard University, and it was magical. Really unforgettable. I enjoyed that a lot. I'm trying to remember who conducted it. I don't remember. Anyway, it was a long time ago.
I really enjoyed this performance. I did feel sometimes, like you said, that in some places it was a bit rushed and could have been just set on and sort of unhurried in some of the phrasing. But mainly the recording and the scoring, the blends of the strings is really what drew me into this a lot. So
it's a beautiful recording.
Yeah.
And the Britten is really beautifully done. I like that a lot. I just kind of felt like the whole second half of the program was kind of lackluster. I don't know. Because I felt like there weren't any real climaxes in the Walton either, because it didn't really build to anything. I just kind of was a little disappointed by that. And I don't blame Walton for it. I blame his arranger. Because he chose I'm sure the opera itself plays really well.
I enjoyed the Walton, but I felt like it was it's a journey of little episodes, I thought, rather than a cohesive thing. So
that was my problem with it. Yeah,
the orchestration of it is kind of fun. There's a lot of variety of timbres and moods and rhythms, but the arc of the composition, I felt, like you say, it's sort of cut and paste with different little scenes and things. So, not that it's not fun to listen to, but
yeah. So this album, I think it's beautifully recorded, and for fans of the conductor, I think you should hear it. If you're like me, interested in the Vaughan Williams piece, I'd look elsewhere. There are other good recordings of it. The Barbaroli, though it's very old, so it's not as beautiful sound, but it still sounds really great. And hear it live if you can, because that was a magical performance that I heard. I really went floating home that night. I remember it really well. This instantly became one of my favorite pieces. Fantasia on a Theme of Thomas Tallis, for those of you, by Rafe Vaughan Williams, I guess we should say. There you go. Okay, now, our next and last one was a fascinating release by the Quatuor Ebène, a French string quartet. And this is called Round Midnight, after the Thelonious Monk piece, or song. And it's a theme of all night-oriented music. And the label, again, I'm not even going to guess. Who is this? I don't know. Erato. I thought it was Erato. Okay. I was going to say it was Erato, but I didn't want to be wrong again. So I didn't write them down this year, so my apologies to the record labels. I'll never work in this field, will I? All right. The Erato label. Erato, by the way, has put out... They were, I think, Label of the Year last year or recently, and they've been putting out just pretty spectacular recordings all year long, too. I've been thrilled by them, by Deutsche Grammophon, by Alpha, and as always, by Hyperion. I really like them a lot. Okay, so we have, in this interesting program, a work by Henri Dutilleux, Ancilla Nui, for string quartet. This is a string quartet. I think it was written in 1976, and it's the only string quartet Dutilleux wrote, and it's considered to be a great work. And I've been fascinated by it forever. I still don't really get it, because it's kind of a hard work to grasp. It's sort of one of these works that all the musical events in it, it happens so fast and slip by and move on to the next thing so fast that you're really not really sure what's happening. And it doesn't really give you any melodies to grab onto either. It's mostly, as is the case with most French composers, timbres. And in this case, you only have string timbres to work with, but he winds up coming up with a lot of really interesting sounds in this work. Okay, the last work on the disc is Schoenberg's Verklärte Nacht in its arranged... Well, it was arranged for string orchestra, and that's really the famous version, but this is the original string sextet version on this one. And in the middle, the cellist for the Quatuor Ebène, Raphael Merlin, has written a piece called Night Bridge, which acts as sort of a bridge between the two works in a concert performance. So they've recorded this program as they performed it in concert. It's not a live performance. It was recorded in the studio. But they've duplicated the the program that they actually played this in. And boy, is it interesting. I liked this a lot. Anyway, let's go through it. It's a bit intellectual, though, I have to say. So if you're kind of someone who wants to kick back and listen to some classical music, this probably isn't for you. But if you need a little intellectual stimulation, this is a fantastic program. I think it's worth doing the work for. To listen. Anyway, Ancilla Nui is a line from Charles Baudelaire poem, and all of the movement names in this string quartet come from Baudelaire poems. So it's sort of a tribute to Baudelaire. Intellectually, this piece is composed at a very high level. One of the influences for this is Beethoven, and one of the things Beethoven did, one of the reasons Beethoven is such a great composer, is because he was able to generate entire four-movement works from a single motif. Think of the Fifth Symphony, da-da-da-da, like the whole first movement is just built up from those four notes. Dutilleux here kind of takes that to a more modern place. He opens with this chord. It's a hexachord. It's like 6 notes, and you hear it kind of fade in, sort of in this slight crescendo, and then it kind of goes, and that's the basis for this entire 20-minute work. You can notice it in the beginning as the first nocturne begins, but once all these sort of melodic figures and pizzicati and sul ponticello and all these other sounds that he throws into the mix come on, you kind of lose track of it. And so it's to this day, I still can't really follow this all the way through, although I thought this might have been the best performance of this work I've ever heard, because it's just so well articulated. It's everything is very clear. The volume, again, is at a very high level, so you might need to turn your stereo down. Although the opening, very quiet opening, comes out fairly loud here on this recording, not in the performance. I mean, it's just the recording. The first chords, this is a hot recording. I noted this quiet but non-melodic piece registers intensely all the way through, because of the hot recording, I think, and because of the performance, of course. Okay, the way this is done, there's an introduction, and then there's the first movement, which is called Nocturne 1. The intro is only 32 seconds long, and then the nocturne begins. Very atmospheric, with the accompanying long tones in the bass perfectly audible. Not always the case in recordings. It's a bit fast, but in this case, that adds to the drama, and this ensemble is able to keep that pace, so it works very well. We hear something like a melody at around the minute and 30 seconds, but it quickly dissipates, as does everything in this work. It's very quicksilver. Like, any new idea comes and it's like it's eluding your grasp and just disappears forever. Sort of like a haiku, I guess you could say, where you're supposed to just grasp the feeling as it flies by. Think of that William Blake poem, Sunrise, right? He who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy. He who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. I think there's a bit of that quality in this work. There are all kinds of intriguing sounds from the instruments too. Pizzicati, there are harmonics. Like I said, sul ponticello, which means you're playing you're putting you're bowing behind the bridge, and it gives like this eerie, ghostly sort of sound. We're hearing all of this, often in different combinations. All right, the next part is called Parenthèse 1. It's a parenthesis, and this recalls previous material and looks forward to the upcoming material. These sections are all very brief, so it's sort of like a little pause between where one's thoughts are collected, or whoever the protagonist is here. Then we get the second movement, Miroir d'Espace, the mirror of space. This starts dramatically and features a stratospheric violin line accompanied by a low cello line, a very nice effect. Okay, all kinds of interesting combinations in this. Then we get Parenthèse 2, the second parenthesis. Again, very brief, and we hear the stratospheric violin, recalling what we just heard, with the other violin playing pizzi like a knocking sound. It's kind of a really cool effect. Then the music swoops downward and plays a swirling melody, which I don't think we hear again, really. I was listening for that. Third movement, Litanies. Slashing figure in the quartet stands out. It repeats twice and comes back in quieter form as the movement goes on. There are lots of pizzicati in this. It kind of sounds like someone's making popcorn. There's just so much of it. Afterwards, there are some eerie sul ponticello sounds, and pizzicati are very heavy in this movement. The seventh track, they've divided like every section of this into another track. They're all very short. Then we get the parenthèse 3, the third parenthesis, a little longer than the other two at 48 seconds, and this one has the pizzicati and the string harmonics played together. Fourth movement, litanies 2. This one is dark with long drawn-out tones and pizzicati punctuation, so they just kind of come in at certain points. We hear some sul ponticello runs, so the bow is on behind the bridge as the fingers run up the neck of the violin. It's very eerie sounding. Afterward, we get contrasting loud scattered chords, and this ends with an upward quiet glissando. And then we get the echo of that in the parenthèse 4. This is long glissandi chords moving upwards. It's brief in the last of the parenthesis movements. Well, they're not movements, sections. The fifth movement is numbered with a Roman numeral 5, constellation, constellations. Pizzicato and slashing strokes, 1 minute 32 seconds, and this is real quicksilver material too. It just vanishes as soon as it registers in your ear. The sixth movement, Nocturne 2. Skittering repeated note figures, then arpeggios with a brief pedal point bed. The arpeggi continue in a kind of chaos, and this is a very brief track at 55 seconds. And then finally, the seventh and final movement, Temps suspendu. We hear the opening chords again, crescendo followed by brief quiet stroke. Okay, but this time it continues differently. So we've gotten back to the beginning again here. We're being reminded of what we heard at the beginning. It continues differently. We hear a lot of familiar material juxtaposed over other familiar material in this movement. And the opening chord ends the work with this bouncing decrescendo on the same chord. It's really interesting. So there's a high intellect at work in this piece. Now, it's kind of hard to follow. It repays repeated listenings. I've been listening to this for years. I would love to read a book on it so I could really just nail down what's happening in it, because it's just hard to grab, but I feel like it's been very rewarding already. This particular performance... Go ahead.
I find it kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Especially the percussive like pizzicato is kind of a very interesting effect used, and some of the trilling gets like an insect like quality to it almost.
20th century composers like insects. I don't know.
As you say, it's ethereal. Just when you sort of think you know what they're doing or where it's going, it's vaporized in onto something else. But I have a feeling it's probably for string players, this is an absolute must listen as far as, techniques and interesting ideas. But I have a feeling that from my perspective, it's probably a lot more fun to play than it is to listen to. Like if I was a string player, I'd want to try this, but I don't know.
I think it's fun to listen to if you're if you know what's happening. Because I remember when I first heard this work, I was like, I didn't have any idea what was going on. But over the years, as you hear, this happens with music. You hear it again and again, and you sort of start to become familiar with it. Even so, I still don't really get this, but I do like hearing it. So something is registering for me in it. I know that I know what I've read about it tells me it's like got a lot of like these real intellectual kind of structural connections in it that I'm just not picking up because they just go by so fast, which is why I'd love to read a book on it. This particular performance, though, was different than other performances I've heard of this due to its clarity and dynamics. And for that reason, I think it's the best performance of this work I've heard. It's the one that really grabbed me the most. But that could be because I'm a little familiar with this work now, and hearing it played like this kind of drew me in further. So I was a little more open-minded towards approaching it. I want to say to anyone who's like afraid of 20th century music, it's a intellectually difficult work, but it's not off-putting and just horrible sounding. It's actually pretty compelling, I think, but it's just not what you'd ordinarily think of when you think of classical music, I guess, unless you're familiar with 20th century music, I think.
It's kind of playful, actually, in its overall approach to it. So,
yeah. Now the next piece, this is the centerpiece of the disc, and for me, it's I don't want to say it's the most interesting. It's the most interesting because it's new. Raphael Merlin, who was the cellist for the Quatuor Ebène, wrote this piece called Night Bridge. He's credited as the composer. Maybe he wrote it all down, but it seems to be an ensemble effort. The booklet seems to claim that they all did this. I guess he's took the responsibility for actually composing it for everybody, where they gave him the ideas. I'm not sure, but anyway, for some reason, this uses 3 jazz tunes to connect the Ancilla Nui night piece by Dutilleux with Verklärte Nacht, the Transfigured Night work of Schoenberg. And he uses the structure of, or they use the structure of Ancilla Nui to put this across. There are the parenthèses sections and that sort of thing. It starts with an introduction, as does Ancilla Nui, and it mimics that work in its form. There are like opening cello notes that kind of are supposed to, I guess, serve as the theme, just like the opening chord serves as the material for the Ancilla Nui. Very brief, and apparently this one tone will form a basis. The second movement is called On Moon River, and the Moon River is pretty much unidentifiable in this particular movement. It sounds a lot like the Ancilla Nui material. Then we get parenthèse 1, and then we get On Moon River 2, or 2, I guess. This apparently includes material taken from Verklärte Nacht in it, with the Schoenberg piece. And we finally hear the melody of Moon River clearly stated. It emerges from the more extract material like a shadow in the night, and then vanishes into chromaticism. It's very cleverly done. It sort of like forms before your ears, and then it just sort of evaporates somehow. The fifth movement, parenthèse 2. Now, they've actually numbered these all in Roman numerals as separate movements, which is not the case with Ancilla Nui. Something feels like it's forming here. It's like a block of marble that hasn't yet exposed the art it will become. The sixth movement goes to On Night and Day, the famous jazz tune. The bows press hard on the instruments to imitate the sound of an antique gramophone in this one. It's really a clever sound, something you ordinarily won't hear from a string quartet. The sound actually sounds like an old record, without the static, of course, and a pizzicato section follows. The seventh movement, parenthèse 3, more Dutilleux-like material here, with ideas quickly coming and going before they can register. Track 20. We're already up to track 20. Movement 8, On Stella by Starlight. I always laugh when I read this because I remember John Lurie's piece, Bella by Barlight,
yes.
which is so evocative. Anyway, check that out. The Chronos Quartet recorded it. Bella by Barlight by John Lurie of the Lounge Lizards.
This was interesting here.
Yeah.
This is getting more disguised, but the rapid bowing technique, it sort of makes this kind of almost like starlight quality to it, sort of some kind of like quasar or something sound. And then after you're just trying to figure out what that is, and it becomes like a country hoedown, which is kind of interesting treatment for Stella by Starlight. And I really like the walking bass line
at the end,
they put in there, yeah.
This one, actually, there's a sextet playing in this, so they brought the other two instrumentalists in who are going to play on Verklärte Nacht. Okay. So they've kind of preloaded the Schoenberg work into this, and it's the longest movement in this work, and the middle section is slow and atmospheric with a combination of Dutilleux and Schoenberg style effects. Halfway through, you hear the melody in the cello, and then the jazzy part starts at around the 5-minute mark, which Russ just told you about. The violin imitates a trumpet in this, by the way. This section also comes as a welcome release after trying to follow all the fleeting abstract ideas in the Dutilleux and in this piece before this point. Then we get to parenthèse 4, which is the 9th movement, track 21. This starts with an echo of Stravinsky's theme for Petrushka. Da 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 da. That kind of tritone, I think that is. That's what I heard anyway. Then we hear some of the intensity we'll feel in the Schoenberg. 10th movement on Round Midnight. This is where the CD gets its name, or the album. This starts with sul ponticello effects. Again, that's playing behind the bridge. You get those eerie, ghostly sounds. The melodic material emerges into the famous theme on violins about 1 minute and 45 seconds in. And then the 11th movement, Lever du Jour, the sunrise. We hear the opening again in the low strings while the violins play sul ponticello figures, and the strings lift upward in their patterns and fade as if they were the night dissipating into day. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was very clever, the whole thing. And there are all these little kind of effects that I think string players would especially enjoy.
Yeah, it was fun. I thought it was curious, though, that the Round Midnight, which is, sort of the theme here, is the most amorphous of the
know,
songs.
Right?
It doesn't really come out to you at all. You got to really listen into it to figure out. You get some of the harmonic movements from Monk's piece, but there's not a lot of the melody in there. Because the other ones are quite obvious, but I thought this was kind of a veiled.
It is, but you can make it out. But it's kind of oddly harmonized. But again, I think that's something that Monk himself would have appreciated, as he had a lot of odd harmonies in his works as well.
Dancing around melodies, very interesting and clever ideas for interpretations of these jazz standards.
The thing, too, though, is that Merlin, it doesn't come across as a pastiche. It actually comes across as a fairly intellectually figured out work. I was really impressed by that. There were a lot of like little musical jokes in it. Just, I don't know about not jokes isn't the right word, but these little effects that sort of were really fascinating. I thought he was really clever in this, in his composition, or the ensemble was anyway.
He's able to pull in a lot of the kind of odd techniques that are introduced in the first work and then work them in here in a different sort of... whereas...
it also gives you a hint as to how the first work actually functions, because
because there, as we were saying, you don't get any melodic development. It's these fleeting references. So here you get those kind of interesting expositions of techniques and things, and then you get a theme that you already know. So it just makes it that much easier to digest before you move on to something new.
Something to hold on to is really helpful in music. That's for sure. All right, and then last we get the Schoenberg's Verklärte Nacht, Opus 4 from 1899. Now, if you're afraid of the big band Schoenberg, I was going to say it's a big band Schoenberg.
That's
Imagine
scary.
what that would be like.
Did Stan Ketton never try that? I don't know.
Wow, that's a boy, that sometimes they'll slip of the tongues, man. You just come up with these like brilliant ideas. Oh, big band Schoenberg. We're going to hear a recording of that next year now because I said that. Watch it.
12-tone trombones.
All right, this is the Big Bad Schoenberg. Who's afraid of the Big Bad Schoenberg? Well, no need to be afraid of this because this piece was written in 1899 before he had developed his 12-tone technique. So this is a highly romantic work, although it's very chromatic. So it's kind of has this kind of overripe and rather histrionic quality to it, but it's like late romanticism with identifiable melodies and things like that. This is better known in its orchestrated version, but this is the original version. It was for a string sextet, and this has now been recorded in its string sextet form quite a few times. The most famous recording of this is by the Hollywood Quartet in a mono recording back in, I think, the 1950s, and I think that remains the best ever recording, although this one's pretty great, but it's not orthodox. Okay, so it's a little, it's very dramatic, though. I really enjoyed this a lot. The additional players, by the way, on this are Antoine Tamistit on viola, and Nicholas Altstadt on cello. He records for Hyperion. I've heard a few of his recordings. So it's a sextet. The whole work is played as a single movement. I hear it or I was introduced to it anyway, as 4 sections, but the track list divides it into 8, and they're apparently going by like letter markings in the score, and that's really not helpful unless you have a score in front of you. So I thought that was a little odd. I'll help you out to follow my 4 sections of this. Now, it was written before Schoenberg went off into the deep end of 12-tone music, and the inspiration for this was a poem by Richard Damel. And in order to understand this work, it's helpful to understand the poem. And I see the poem as being in 4 parts as well. The first part is the introduction. 2 people are walking through a bare, cold wood. It's a man and a woman. And they're together romantically. Anyway, at one point, this is part 2, the woman's voice speaks, and she says that she's carrying someone else's child. She's in a state of sin, and she feels really bad. She desperately wanted to have a baby. And then she's got pregnant with this other guy, and then she found this guy, the love of her life, and she's pregnant with someone else's child, and she's all upset about it. And we're going to hear a lot of that in the histrionic music writing on this. The third part starts with the man talking, and he's very reassuring, and he's... This is actually a little nauseating, but what he says is, don't worry about that. The universe is shining above us, and the warmth we feel between us will transform the child you're carrying into my child, so it'll be our child through the magic of our love.
That's horrible.
How romantic, huh? I know, right? Anyway, but it was kind of the kind of thing that turned people on at the end of the 19th century, so deal with it. Anyway. And the fourth part for me would be they just go walking on more happily now. The woman is no longer upset. All right, so anyway, keep that in mind as we go through this score. I know, right? God. Anyway, the first track... Now, these are labeled with the speed or the tempo instructions in the score. Sehr langsam is first. The man and the woman are walking along the road in this, so you can imagine them here. This is very quietly played again. Wide dynamics on this whole album. I enjoyed the freedom that the violins... I noticed this right away. They have like a bird-like twittering at 1 minute and 30 seconds in, and usually you don't really hear this kind of freedom in performances of this work. So I was really delighted to hear that. The dynamic range is wide. It gets pretty loud. Again, don't set your volume by the beginning. All right, at 2 minutes and 54 seconds in the first track, part 2, in my opinion, starts. This is where the woman's agitation begins. Now, keep in mind, when you're listening to this work, Schoenberg is not telling the story of the poem. He's reflecting the feelings of the people in the poem. So we're hearing the woman's agitation. Obviously, she's talking, but I think what we're hearing is what's happening inside her. Okay, as far as and it gets very histrionic. She kind of goes into despair towards the end of this track, and track 25, which is labeled here as movement 2. That's not. I don't think that's right though. That they should be labeled as movements. We get a feeling of the woman's loneliness as the music quietens and slows. It's very expressive from the ensemble. They leave themselves lots of room for expression, and the tempo is pretty slow, which works very well here. The agitation comes back toward the end of this section. The next track, Breiter, has something hopeful but lamenting to it. And we're thinking here maybe the woman is thinking of the life she's carrying in her and how wonderful it would be, or her thoughts of being a mother when she was with this other guy. A lot of the material is lyrical and moving, and some would say maudlin, like the poem itself. And then agitation comes back at the end. She's really like upset about this situation, that she's found this great guy, and she's pregnant with someone else's child. Okay, in the track 27, labeled Rasche, the agitation spills over, and we get a unison statement of the theme, which is very, very dramatic. Around the 20-second mark, you really can't miss it. Unison means like all these string instruments, all 6 of them are playing the same notes, although at different kind of frequencies. That's the peak of her whole lament. And then the walking on and stumbling from the poem, we can hear at about 1 minute and 18 seconds. Track 28, this is where part 3 starts, and this is where the man starts speaking, reassuring the woman. The music is warm, bright, and rocking, like the aurora borealis shining on the couple. There's unexpected color already, even in the orchestration of this piece. And you can see why he would want to make this an orchestral string work after this. The melody is very comforting and warm, and the rocking motion at 1 minute and 58 seconds, to me, represents the shining of the universe that the man mentions in the poem. The players make the score sound not as dense as it usually comes across, and that's a good thing. The orchestration is very easy to follow in this recording. Track 29, Im Zeitmaß. The positive words of the man spill over into this section and develop more. Well characterized by the ensemble. Track 30, Etwas bewegt. We're still in part 3 as far as I'm concerned, and the man's transformative words continue. There's a beautiful, soothing release of tension in about 1 minute and 30 seconds. There are these 2 chords, but they don't resolve into a cadence. He's very much in the Mahler school of or the Wagner school of letting cadences just not happen until you can't stand anymore, really. Those chords repeat several times before the end of the section. They do release a lot of tension when you hear them. They're very kind of reassuring. I think just because they're being repeated so many times. And the final track, Sehr ruhig. The glittering sky and the reassurance of the man's words come together in this last section. I hear a lot of the affection between the man and the woman in the first minute of this part. Part 3 is finally winding down. There's one more outburst of passion on the woman's part at 1 minute 46 seconds. Then a histrionic release of a lot of attention, but still no cadence. There's a lot of teasing as far as this cadence goes. We get a lot of, kind of false cadences that just continue and continue and continue until the resolution is finally heard at about 3 minutes and 35 seconds. To me, this is where part 4, the conclusion, starts. It's only about a minute long. It's the man and the woman walking on as the universe shines above. So like the opening, except this time you have that rocking shining universe section music playing. The ensemble does a lot to bring out the drama of this piece. It comes across as very histrionic and dramatic, but in keeping with what's in the score. This is very appropriate for this period. I like the fact that they interpreted this very difficult to play, dense score. It doesn't really sound terribly dense here. No balance problems in this. And for the album in general, I thought it was intellectually stimulating. This isn't and also there's a lot of emotion in the last piece. It's not for everyone, I guess, but I think it should be. Keep an open mind. Don't try to relax. Enjoy it and just be like be a better person. Listen to this. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed the Schoenberg, which I usually can't say. But
that's an early work.
this is good. I mean, as you say, histrionic. It develops the themes with kind of considerable angst in the playing, and they draw that out really well in their phrasing. But there's also a lot of contrasting sections that have a lot of tenderness and beauty in the playing, especially in the fifth movement there. And then the ending is, quite lovely too. I thought the combination of the pizzicato and rapid bowing at the end in Schoenberg's writing is really nice. And they seem to get all the contrasts and the arcs of this composition really well done. And so it's you can follow all of that. And as you say, that he doesn't always satisfy you with the kind of harmonic movement that you're longing for.
It's all that chromaticism. It just clouds everything,
But he always ties it over into something that's makes you forget that, and then you're on to the next thing. And they develop those things, and I feel like the phrasing and the sort of development of everything is really continuous and ties you through to the end. So you feel like you get the complete picture of the work. So that's a really good performance. It's an interesting combination, challenging program. Definitely, I think people who normally listen to
Challenging in a good way, I want to emphasize.
If you like to listen to, string quartets in general, and you want to try something a little bit more interesting in terms of program, this is something interesting to sit down and listen to, not as background music, but very intently, and see if you can figure out what's going on.
Okay, so there we go. We're done with classical music, and I've polished off quite a bit of my whiskey, and I have to say my eyes are watering from the 59 proof, but I'm still ready to go into the jazz here, and I'm happy about that because of the theme for this week, which is what, Russ?
Well, we're going all organic this weekend.
Yeah, we are organic.
That's right. In the sense of the B3.
Oh, we're such fans of the Hammond B3, aren't we? The organ.
That's right.
This is an adult music, things we love. Okay, this would be on our things we love list. The Hammond B3 organ. So
you're going to get an organic high if you listen to this music, but you won't need any extra substances. Only your ears. You have a little
I think you'll get a spring in your step too.
Yeah. I just had these organ recordings going back to the end of the summer, and I kept getting more, and I just couldn't hold them back anymore. So,
right. I've picked up a lot of organ recordings this year because of you mostly, but I would have picked up quite a few of them anyway. That's
and I don't know if it's just that, since we started this and I've been looking at everything that's coming out, that I've noticed them, or if like organ is really, becoming a thing now. With keyboard players who weren't exclusively organ players, but they want to do it, or if it's just getting more attention. But there's a lot of organ recordings this year
now, yeah,
and they're really good, and a lot of variety there.
I haven't heard a bad one really. All the ones we heard were really great, and I picked up quite a few of them too.
Yeah, of course. The big one we did this year, I think that we like the best is "It's All Your Fault."
By Michael Ledon,
that was recorded sort of at the beginning of the pandemic and came out. And if you haven't heard it, go and check out our interview with Michael Ledon too.
But there were others too that I keep going back to. There was the Brian Charette one.
Yeah, Brian Charette, that's an interesting one.
It was a little unusual.
Yeah.
And we like the Delvon Lamar one a lot too. It's kind of fun, got this funky groove. It's kind of like,
if you want to just get your grooves down, the Delvon Lamar, that's a really great one too. And I think that's coming up, not really in the pure jazz sort of genre, but sort of the jam band kind of soul groove kind of thing. I think he'll turn on a lot of sort of younger audience that maybe not are jazz fans yet, but the grooves that group gets are really hard to not be infected by. If you're walking along and you hear that music, you're going to be drawn into it with the magic of the organ.
The Hammond B3 is a soulful instrument.
It sure is. Yeah. I've got 3.5 releases here. Yeah. 3.5. And we're going to start out with an interesting one by a man who is not content to sit behind the organ. No. A fellow who I saw when I was in high school. He was the same age as me. We were at the Downbeat Music Fest in Chicago, and he would go on to big things in music. Mr. Joey DeFrancesco.
While Russ would go into big things in podcasting.
Yeah. And other endeavors. But this is called More Music on the Mac Avenue label. I don't know. Maybe it should be called More Instruments, because that's what's going on here.
And he's playing them all too. It's
that's
amazing.
The thing,
he's like Prince. He just plays everything.
So on this album, we've got Joey D, as he is affectionately called.
That's actually what I wrote in my notes. Always Joey.
Yeah,
Joey D.
Joey D. On organ, trumpet, which he's played before on at least one recording, I think this is the first time we're going to hear him on his latest endeavor, the tenor saxophone.
Right.
And vocals, too. So
he sings one track on this.
Joey D sings, too. And
he also plays keyboards, which is not the organ. I'm not sure what it is. So to make
things confusing for listening to this, in his trio is also made up of Lucas Brown, the guitarist, who also plays organ.
Right.
When Joey D is doing something else. But they're both also playing keyboard, which I don't know if it's a synth. They're often using an electric piano kind of sound.
Right.
And they're switching off between the two of them with this. And it's hard to know who's doing what sometimes.
Although Joey, on the organ, Joey has like a very soulful sound. He's got to be like the most soulful organist out there.
Yeah. And Lucas Brown is a different kind of approach to it. So they're easy to distinguish on when they're on the organ. And then we've got Michael Ode. I think that's how I say it. It's Ode on drums. And so
he's a hard-hitting drummer, I have to say, especially for a jazz drummer, yeah. And
and it gets a good effect with the very soulful style of the tunes that Joey DeFrancesco has here. So let's go through it and see if we can figure out what's going on. The first track is called Free, and this has got Joey D on trumpet and keyboard with Brown soloing on the Hammond B3. So it's a swinging number. It's got these kind of alternating organ chords that build up the tension. And Joey D's got a Harmon mute in his trumpet. And I like his trumpet playing. He's got pretty good chops, and he swings really well on trumpet. And I also like the way that he phrases. He gets very long lyrical phrases. You know, they go way over the bar lengths, and so he's a fluid player, and so he does a really nice swinging solo here. Then Brown solos on organ, and Joey backs him on the keyboards, so electric piano kind of sound. They stick on the alternating chords for a bit after the solos for Ode to do some drumming, and then Joey pulls the mute out of the trumpet back for a bit of the melody for the ending. So it's a nice tune to start out, and Joey's off on his first trumpet excursion. Track 2 is Lady G, and this is an original tune dedicated to his wife. This has got Brown on keys and organ. It's a ballad with kind of a rockabye bass pedal line to it. You can almost get this kind of sense of motion from it. There's also these kind of cool Rhodes electric piano like phaser kind of chords that pan from left to right. It's a nice effect, especially if you're listening on headphones. And here, now Joey's on sax. He's got a mellow and full tone. It's sometimes breathy. He has kind of a legato style attack to it.
I kind of felt like he was going for that Stan Getz sound.
Yeah. And he gets out some pretty fast licks in places. Apparently, I guess he was working with like Pharoah Sanders and stuff with getting his
He did an album that Pharoah Sanders appeared on a few years ago.
But he sounds really relaxed on his sax approach. Brown, you get a sense of his organ style here. It's a very smooth kind of organ solo. And then in the mix of all this, Ode gets some kind of interesting drum accents. It's a very pretty tune, and a nice first setting for Joey D's sax playing. Track 3, Just Beyond the Horizon, and now Joey D's going to be on his organ as usual, so you're going to get that approach that you expect from him. It's got a busy drum intro into a swinging tune, and now Brown is on guitar in the trio, and he takes the melody. The organ and guitar trade off for a bit on the melody before a return to the guitar lead. The beat changes up from swing to Latin in sections on this tune, and that always helps push the solos along when it switches back and forth. Joey gets the first solo with some inspired lines. And then Brown is up for guitar solo. He has a really kind of liquid, flowing style in his playing on his solo here. Then the organ and guitar trade eights for a while, and goes into an organ vamp, and Ode gets to beat the skins over that for this tune. Just Beyond the Horizon. Track 4, In Times of Reflection. This one starts with a piano intro by Joey D. It gets excited. It sounds pretty
classical sounding, too. Yeah. It's kind of not very jazzy. Yeah.
No, it gets excited, and then it chills out into like a medium waltz melody in unison with Brown's acoustic guitar. Should change the effect here. Joey switches over to harmon muted trumpet for a section. Then Brown takes a kind of melodic and relaxed solo on the acoustic guitar. Joey takes a trumpet solo. He finds some really sweet notes, weaving long collected lines, gets some kind of false fingering effects in. And then, why not? He takes a piano solo himself, too. And he shows off some flourishing runs, trills, and rolling chords on the piano.
Right.
So
he sounds like Chopin on the piano. He's kind of playing these like it's arpeggiated sort of melodies.
Very classical approach. He's all over the place on the instruments on this tune, but it's a nice one to listen to.
Somebody stop him.
Yeah, somebody stop him. I don't know what he's going to do next. He's going to sing. Well, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that soon.
Track 5 is Angel Calling, and this has got Brown on organ. Joey's back on tenor sax. He starts out with some soulful rubato lines over organ swells, and then relaxing tempo gets set by Ode. Joey plays the melody, getting down in the low registers, and then he adds kind of a high squawk here and there. I guess that's his Pharoah Sanders influence there. Overall, though, he's still kind of relaxed in his sax approach. There's an unexpected modulation that kind of lifts up, and then Brown gets an organ solo. His style is quite different from Joey's, and he keeps it really smooth here. And then Joey's back for the melody on the sax, and it kind of ends abruptly at the end of the melody. No dragging out with holds or anything there. Track 6 is called Where to Go, and they're both on organ here. Two organ playing things here. Brown gets the first solo. After an intro with organ and a little keyboard, then we get harmon muted trumpet and Brown's organ playing the kind of humorous melody to this blues tune in unison. Joey ditches the mute for his trumpet solo. He plays on, and Brown switches up to like a walking bass line in the organ here. Change keys, another modulation, and Brown gets an organ solo. Joey switches to some keys behind, and Brown gets really funky in his solo here. Then Joey can't resist, and he comes in with an organ solo of his own. Gets kind of really funky, as he can do here. Sounds cool. The bass pedals groove on after that, and then it's time for Ode to play drums. And there's a few kind of mysterious electric piano chords thrown in over the drum solo before they're back to the melody with a trumpet and organ. So everybody's having a good time playing lots of different instruments here. Track 7, Roll With It. This is in the regular trio format, so with Joey D back on organ. This is a tricky bop-ish unison melody with guitar and organ here, and it stops and starts in different places, adds some tension to it. Brown is up for a solo first on guitar. He gets some cool double stop notes in his lines, and he's got a really compact kind of sound. And Joey builds a bouncy organ solo with snappy rhythms and boppy phrases here, and he gets some real blazing lines in on the organ as well. And there's some stop time chords for a little drum play before they get back to the melody.
Yeah, that is a hard-hitting drum solo.
Yes. track 8, and here it is. And if you please, I guess this is a cover of Mario Romano tune, and Brown is on organ for this tune that gets a smoky sax intro, and then Joey is in on the vocals.
Yeah.
He's got a mellow baritone kind of voice.
He kind of sounds like Tony Bennett.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of caught a little bit of that Tony Bennett in there.
And he jumps into a sax solo right after the verse, then back to the vocal, and then he comes right back in on sax again, and it fades to the end. Well, not bad. I'm glad he only sings on one tune.
No, he's a good singer. I mean, he's not like he's not going to have a career as a jazz singer because he's just not as subtle as like really great jazz singers are. But I mean, he sounds good. I mean, the thing is, he sings, he plays the sax, he plays the trumpet, he plays the organ. All I do is talk on a podcast, and people complain about that. I can't do anything here.
Yeah, I think these other guys, he might just cut them loose and go out on his own.
Yeah, maybe he'll be like Prince in the studio by himself. He'll just double track everything or overlay everything into this multi-track recording. I see that coming, by the way. There's going to be a Joey DeFrancesco recording that goes like
band.
that. Yeah.
The big band, along with the Schoenberg big band.
Or the Schoenberg big band. Maybe that's what it'll do. That'd be cool.
Next track, More Music, the title track. This is also in a trio with Joey on guitar, or on keyboards, and Brown on guitar. It's a cool intro with really high organ chord hits, smooth guitar melody by Brown. This is one of those smooth jazz, kind of driving on a sunny day, laid back grooves with a syncopated bass. It's a lot of adjectives together, but if you grew up in the 80s with that kind of like smooth jazz was popular, it's that kind of just driving groove. You can imagine the top down on some ocean kind of highway. It's a nice clean tone organ solo start with really tight rhythms. And as he builds up the solo, he pulls out some of the stops, gets a more percussive kind of sound and different tones here. Brown is next with a liquid tone solo again, and he adds some effects to it at the end. So kind of a cool grooving tune. 10 is This Time Around. So electric piano intro. It changes up, adding an organ to the even beat, and the organ and electric piano double up on the melody. I guess that it's Brown on the electric piano. The solo's first. It's one of those sounds with the kind of blown out, distorted low tones, on the electric piano. It sounds really, it sounds cool. It's supposed to have that effect. Then organ bass pedal lines and chords fill in the gaps in there. So it's really, funky rhythmically. It's over to Joey D for an organ solo next, and he keeps it really energized and funky as usual. They get back to some unison melody, and then Joey pulls out some different organ tones to really whip things up unto the end. So this one is energized tune. And then the final tune, 11, is called Soul Dancing. This gets up a gospel-y big amen organ intro into a medium groove gospel-y soul tune. The organ and electric piano again here. Brown goes first on electric piano, and then Joey D goes to church on the organ on this one. He always finds just the right stop mixtures for the tunes. The tones always match exactly what's building or settling in the music. And it comes back down for the melody on organ again, and then they trade off phrases until a final organ cadenza and a big finish. So more music, more instruments. What could he try next? I don't know. It sounds like they're having a lot of fun, though, so why not?
Yeah, it was a fun album. I liked it a lot. I liked hearing him on all these instruments, but I really want to hear him on the organ.
Yeah.
That's why I listen to him, and we got a bit of that here, so that's okay.
Some really.
By the way, go ahead.
Really
I want to recommend to listeners. By the way, Joey DeFrancesco's Christmas album. He's playing organ on all of it. It's really great.
Right.
From 2014. So check that out.
Yeah. And I think he got, did he not get a Grammy nomination for the Christian McBride? No, for the Christian McBride big band.
Joey for Wes Oliver.
Yeah,
that one?
yeah.
Yeah, well, certainly Chris McBride did. We should talk about the Grammys a little bit once we're at the end, actually, because we didn't mention that at the beginning.
Yeah.
We probably should have.
We don't want to get too depressed in the middle of an organic high.
There are things to complain about, but I thought I liked a lot of the jazz picks, but, they always pick the same.
Always the same people.
Artists.
Right?
They always have the same people, yeah.
Now, here's someone
they did pick this, though. Oh, did they? No. No, this is too late for them. Okay. But they picked the Christian McBride album. That was really great.
Now, the next organic high piece. We're going to cross the ocean to your land of your ancestors.
Oh, are we? Oh, yes, we are. Okay.
And make a connection. The label is WM Italy. The title is Connection. And this is by saxophonist Rosario Giuliani.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest trumpet players in the world, Fabrizio Bosso.
Yeah.
Now, here's a guy who should be winning all kinds of awards, but he's just too good. He's just better than all of the American trumpet players.
Yeah.
He really is. So
I want to say one thing about the CD is I looked this up and it's highly, highly priced. It's really expensive as a physical copy. I think as it's coming from Italy.
Could be, yeah. Luckily, we can listen to it on streaming.
Right.
So Fabrizio Bosso on trumpet, Rosario Giuliani saxophone, Alberto Grisi on Hammond organ, and Marco Valeri on drums.
It's a bunch of Italians, eh?
It's a bunch of Italians. What are you going to do about it? And as you would expect, the first track is called Dubai. Well, of course, no.
Do you have any background on this? Do you know why they called it that?
None at all.
No?
Not
I don't know
any
either.
Album notes or anything here, so you just have to
I don't think they would say on the album either.
By my ears. But this is starts with a drum intro, and it's a very kind of post-bop type of tune with a little bit of Middle Eastern flavor in the scales that they choose.
There it is. Maybe that's why.
The Dubai, yeah. After the busy melody, it settles a bit, and you will hear one of the best trumpeters in the world today, Fabrizio Bosso. He has more technique than like three other trumpet players combined. Once he builds his solo up, he rips through lines with amazing technique and dexterity, always with a sense of humor. Giuliani is up next on tenor, and he gets some blazing lines as well. And when they break into driving swing in the middle of his solo. Grisi is next with his solo, all the while keeping a brisk bass line on the pedals. The horns are back with a snippet of the melody before Valeri gets turn on the drums here as well. So things are off to a kind of post-boppy start.
I want to say another thing about Bosso as a trumpet player is not only does he have a great technique, but he has a great sense of what to play when.
Oh yeah,
that's something really special as well. He always just sounds really great.
Yeah, I just think, I can't think of any trumpet player who's better than him. And what I also like about him is that he's very competent in all styles of jazz. He can play in a swing style, and he's cultivated an excellent plunger mute technique, which was sort of really out of fashion with modern trumpet players. But when he wants to pull that out, he can really do some interesting sounds with that too. Track 2 here is called More Than Ever, and I also don't have any composition notes that come with any of the materials. I looked even in Italian, so I can't give credit to these. But anyway, this is a mid-tempo swinger. It's got a lilting melody for unison sax and a kind of cup-muted trumpet. The sax and trumpet trade off lines rather than soloing individually before Giuliani takes a fleet organ solo over his bass pedals that really dig in on this number. His organ tone has a sharp attack and just enough kind of distortion to the sound to be, kind of cool and dirty. He then outlines the chords for Valeri to get some solo fills, and they get back to the melody, and Giuliani ends it with some altissimo notes up in the high register. Track 3 is called A Winter Day. The organ swells in, and Giuliani makes a perfect organ intro for Giuliano to introduce the melody. He trades off with Bosso on the flugelhorn, and then they come in together on harmonized longer notes. And Giuliani and Bosso both take individual turns, and Fabrizio gets some cute slides into the upper register, interesting interval play, and half-valve smears in his solo. Giuliani plays some more, and then they join in on the harmonized section again before trading out on the melody. And through it all, Giuliani backs with organ chords and swells to match the mood. And speaking of mood, the fourth track is called Fabrizio's Mood. It's a swinging melody with sax and unison harmon muted trumpet. Giuliani takes the first solo, and Valeri mixes up the beat behind, pushing him along with accents. Fabrizio is up next for a solo. Some fine accented phrases here among his fast swinging lines. Giuliani swings really hard on his solo here too, and then they all trade off with the drums. 5, we got a cover of a tune I've always loved, Freddie Hubbard's Little Sunflower. And this starts with a minor organ vamp, and the horn lines slink in sexily. The melody shifts to major at the end of this melody, so it's got that harmonic change that you'll look forward to. Giuliani is first on the solos. He rips through some modes and outside playing, while Giuliani backs him very nicely on the organ. Bosso starts his solo gently on this tune. He gets in some upper register lines, some chromatic lines as well, and a few odes to Freddie Hubbard in his stylings, with some intervals like Hubbard used to use in his solos. And after repeating the melody, they get some trading play to jam out at the end. 6 is called Coffee Shop, and this sounds like someone who's had a few too many espressos, I think.
Yeah, I thought this was a good name.
Yeah. It's a syncopated start and stop melody, like a fast bop style, that shows off Valeri's beat chops on the drums. Giuliani and Bosso rip it up with fast bluesy solos and exchanges. Giuliani feeds them with huge bass pedal rising lines and chords before launching into his own rhythmic solo. Then they trade off with the drums. Everyone jams out before coming back to the caffeinated melody and riffing out on the final line for a bit before the end. Track 7, called 74 Miles Away, and you wonder where's that come from. Listen to it. A chugging organ intro brings the horns in, and they're playing in a 7/4 time signature here. So I guess that's the 74 miles reference. And the melody, it's interesting. It's like in 7/4, but it sort of slows and restarts a few times, so it doesn't keep in the tempo. Bosso solos first. Here he works up into a frenzy of trills over the unusual meter. Giuliani is more laid back and rhythmic at first in his solo. Then he weaves long, fast lines with other rhythmic phrases as he builds. A lot of nice, intense soloing on here. It's not an easy meter to play. I guess you think in your mind, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, like that. But, a little bit challenging for phrasing solos. And it ends with track 8, Walking Around. Trumpet and sax on an impossibly fast head for this tune. The organ joins in. The bass pedals are running instead of walking here. Right. This is like the Stairmaster for organ pedals. Bosso blazes
Just imagine
through,
what that must look like.
yeah, bouncing your legs up and down. Bosso blazes through a swinging solo, and then Giuliani is off to the races on his solo. The horns fan the flames with some cool backing lines. Giuliani comes back into his solo over drums only, and that gives him some freedom to play some phrases outside the chords. And he also quotes a bit from A Love Supreme while doing that, and works that in there. They pull off the tricky head once more to close it out. Overall, kind of a fun album, getting some really good Italian musicians together. They've all got really good chops. First, I've heard of Giuliani, but I like his playing. It's kind of soulful. He's got the gritty sound that gets in there well, and I'm always happy to hear Fabrizio. He's doing a lot of collaborations and guest spots on albums. I'm waiting for his next sort of solo release to come out. But
coincidentally, he also has a Christmas album that's well worth your time. It's called It's called Merry Christmas Baby, Fabrizio Bosso Quartet. So check that out for Christmas, and that'll jazzify your Christmas, as will Joey DeFrancesco's album Home for the Holidays. So 2 Christmas recommendations for you too.
It will be featuring a Fabrizio trumpet leader disc as soon as he puts something out next.
He's great.
So, one of my favorites.
I'm going to try to get him on the show too. That'd be cool.
We'll do that. I think Nathan might be able to help us out with that. Our man on the ground in Italy.
Our man on the ground in Italy. Yeah.
He talked to Fabrizio in I think it was when he was playing in Milan one time. So that would be cool. I know that he speaks English, so and I've turned on a few of my American jazz fan friends to his playing. So I hope he gets better known. But I have a feeling.
Hopefully this podcast that's kind of what we're doing this for. We want people listening to the music we really love.
But I think a lot of the American players better watch out, because this guy's got some serious chops, man.
He does.
Now, let's cross back over that big pond. Hey.
To another guy with an Italian name. Jeez.
Another Italian, but he's a New Yorker. Well, upstate New York, from Rochester, New York.
Where's Joey from? He's from Philadelphia, I think, right?
I think so, yeah. But this organist is from Rochester, New York, a city that's put out actually quite a few famous jazz musicians over the years. And that's Mr. Pat Bianchi. And he's got something to say. That's the name of the album. Actually,
Something to Say is the name of the album.
Yeah, Something to Say. That's the first part of the album. The second part of the title is The Music of Stevie Wonder.
Yeah, and I guess it's no surprise that Stevie Wonder's music transfers really well into jazz. It's kind of jazzy as it is. You know?
This is on the Savant label. And I watched an interview with Pat, and he was talking about the influence of Stevie Wonder, and he sort of puts him in the same category of popular composers as Duke Ellington would be. And I guess, that's not an exaggeration, really. Certainly, if you're in the baby boomer to Generation X sort of a demographic, you couldn't escape the music of Stevie Wonder, listening to the radio from the late 60s right through the 80s into the 90s. Stevie Wonder was a huge pop star, but also an interesting composer, and someone who wrote really well-structured pop songs with a lot of variety to them. And
he's one of the 20th century giants, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Duke Ellington, absolutely. And also, even just great songwriters, like people like, Paul Simon, who have written all these like great songs. I mean, he's in a totally different style, but nevertheless, these are songs that are just going to be covered forever. Like, Joni Mitchell, I consider Stevie Wonder to be there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He always wrote really good melodies, and also, the harmonic sort of aspect of his pop songs were always really good and well-flowing. And so one of the things he said in the interview was, although they do some really interesting arrangements of the tunes and take a lot of liberties, when he was playing the melodies to them, he tried to keep the tempos as close to the originals as possible and play the melodies so that, you would feel like you could sing along with them. And I think he does that pretty well here. And so, from Rochester, New York, he has a Grammy nomination. I'm not sure what year that was, but he's got an impressive resume. He's played with Bud Shank and guitar legend who recently passed away. We mentioned Pat Martino. And I guess he plays this kind of organ. It's a mag, I think it is. It's like a Hammond clone organ, but it sounds just like the Hammond that I expect here. I'll have to find more out about that because I don't imagine it's too easy to get a real Hammond B3 organ these days. I don't know.
Well, do they not make them anymore?
I don't think so. If I ever win the lottery, and I don't know what to spend my money on, I'll just have a additional room or buy a whole house to put a Hammond organ, just to have it.
Does it take up that much space? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I want to have my big Leslie speaker and everything.
Oh yeah.
Just so anyway, but so the music of Stevie Wonder, of course, Bianchi on organ. We've got Paul Ballenbach on guitar and Byron Landham on drums, and special guest artist Wayne Escoffery on tenor sax. And I know his playing, he's a UK-born saxophonist, but I believe he moved to the US at a young age, and I came to know him as a sideman on some Tom Harrell recordings, and I also have, I think, his debut as a leader too. So he's a fine up-and-coming established tenor saxophone player, and he adds to, I think it's 2 tunes here. And we start out, not all of these, I should say, are Stevie Wonder tunes that may immediately come to mind.
Yeah, he chose this really well. It's kind of interesting.
And one, I'm not quite sure what it is, if it is even a Stevie Wonder tune. I don't think it is. But anyway, we start out with Go Home. This is a single from 1985.
It sounds like a Stevie Wonder song.
Yeah, this one is. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
This is a 1985 single. Sets a nice groove with rapid runs between the melodic phrases. Landham does a nice job of mixing up different beats on this tune. I thought he gets a lot of textures out of the melodies. Bianchi turns out an energized solo on this one while keeping the bass line impossibly funky here. And Ballenbach here, he uses a very kind of thick rock style tone, and his solo is really, as a rock guitarist here too. So but you'll see he's capable of lots of different styles here. His playing is very impressive here. There's also a synthy kind of sound in the interlude section in the first part of the song, and I think Bianchi's only playing organ, so I think that's Ballenbach doing like a guitar kind of synth effect here too. It's kind of a complex composition of this tune, but it makes a good first impression of what they're going to do with the arrangements of these tunes.
I just want to say about this one tune, though, the electric guitar solo was really screaming and fantastic, but it faded out at the end when he was really taking off. He was like, what was that? I wanted to hear the rest of that solo. Yeah.
He was really burning. And I thought, this is going to be like a lot of rock guitar on here. But no, there's a lot of interesting variety in the guitar on this recording. Track 2, Until You Come Back to Me, parentheses, that's what I'm going to do. This one is a Stevie Wonder tune. I think he has co-writers, Morris Broadnix and Clarence Paul. It was originally recorded by Stevie Wonder in 1967, but it wasn't released as a single and it didn't appear on an album until 1977's anthology album, Looking Back. The best known version of the tune is actually by Aretha Franklin in 1973, and she had a top 10 hit with it. It's a ballad with a nice switch here after that rocking guitar solo by Bollenbach to acoustic guitar. And Bianchi fills and swells around the more delicate sound of the acoustic, but he never overpowers that. He gets really nice dynamics. It gets a little sparse for Bianchi to start his solo with kind of spaced articulation first and then more flowing lines. Another tune that Landum shows he's a really good backing drummer on. He mixes up the accents in interesting ways to push a soloist. And Bollenbach takes a short solo on guitar before returning to the melody as well here. So very different kind of mood compared to the first track. 3, we're going to go for one of the big hits everyone knows, Superstition from 1972's Talking Book album. A very cool organ riff to start this one off. It's got a hesitant kind of rhythmic beginning, some cool guitar synth backing, and then Escoffery joins in with the melody on tenor, and they give it a medium slow swing tempo, not a rock approach as you might expect. Escoffery solos with bluesy ideas and a big fat sound. Bianchi's solo is full of really fast lines and intensity, and Bollenbach gets just enough distortion for a dirty sound with a lot of sustain and a cool rocking solo on this tune as well. Bianchi goes around the opening riff for a bit for Landum to get some drum play in before Escoffery comes back with the melodies. So it's an interesting arrangement and easily to recognize the melody.
Yeah, it's easy to recognize the melody, but the thing is, to me, this song is immediately recognizable by its funky keyboard kind of figure.
Right.
You know, and they don't do that.
No,
I was kind of
surprised
by that. I was kind of like, wow. Anyway, but yeah, the melody is easily identifiable, so you know what it is.
Yeah, they don't give you what you expect the most, which is kind of
right.
cool.
Yeah, I like that.
4 is not Blue Moon, but actually Moon Blue. And this is from the 2005 Stevie Wonder album, A Time to Love. There's a nice cascading, alternating chord opening on the organ. Bianchi gets snuggled up to the melody right away, giving a lyrical effect to the phrasing. Bollenbach is backing on chords on acoustic guitar, and then he comes in to take over the melody midway through. Bianchi finds all the sweet harmonic spots in the chords in his solo on this tune, also the right spots to insert some bluesy phrases. He is really fleet and fast with his 16th note lines. He has really good facility running up and down the keyboard on this whole album. He's really fast and impressed me a lot here. Bollenbach plays a more relaxed solo here with nice articulation and tone on the acoustic guitar. And at the end, Bianchi shows some nice Leslie effects on the chords, getting that swirling sound coming around. So another good arrangement here.
One thing I notice about Stevie Wonder's too is he's one of those songwriters who, like, every song he writes is really positive. You know, he never writes anything.
He doesn't have any downers,
critical or anything. Yeah,
no.
He's kind of all happy and lift yourselves up, and we're going to help the world kind of lyrics. I mean, it's really fantastic. You need more people like that.
Isn't she lovely? I just called to say I love you.
Yeah.
It's almost too happy.
Yeah. You are the sunshine of my life.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know. It's on and on.
Maybe because he can't see everybody else's sour faces around him. He stays so happy. I don't know.
I think he's I think that's a conscious choice of his. I think he's really positive. I like that about him.
Well, that positive one, number 5, Isn't She Lovely?
Speaking of which, right?
1976 album, Songs in the Key of Life. This one is given an infectious shuffle beat for this hit tune. Bianchi plays the melody so that you can sing along easily. And Bollenbach is more jazzy here with a different electric guitar kind of tone. It's clear. He swings really hard with a lot of melodic ideas in his solo. Bianchi uses a straight tone on his solo at the beginning here and adds tension with harmonized notes and trills in his lines. He gets the high hold soloing, or rather the high notes held and then solos below them, which always sounds really cool on the organ. Get that sustain up on the top. Then he changes the stops and he adds some Leslie tones for some different effects in the second half of his solo. He rolls it straight into a brief melody restatement right out of the solo that keeps the intensity and momentum to the end of the tune. 6 is a tune I've always liked, If It's Magic. This is also from Songs in the Key of Life, 1976. This one features acoustic guitar at the beginning with some overtones that lead to a really pretty solo acoustic introduction. Then the organ and guitar join in for a gentle 6/8 rhythm. Bianchi starts it out in the warm lower register of the organ, and his solo works up into racing lines and ends in a great swell to hand off to Bollenbeck's acoustic solo that includes a lot of interesting melodic and rhythmic ideas. Then Bianchi comes back on the bridge into the melody, and Bollenbeck adds some overtones to remind you of the beginning just before they close it out. A very nice arrangement of a pretty tune. 7, Something to Say, from the title. This is from the 1970 album, Signed, Sealed, and Delivered. Escoffery is back here to carry the melody over the swinging beat. Bianchi fills the breaks with some blazing lines into his solo, and Landum turns on the cymbals right there to drive it along. Bollenbeck chops out tasty chords on electric behind Bianchi's lines, and Escoffery gets to solo. Here, he includes a lot of fast 16th note fluid lines in his solo. Bollenbeck's in more jazzy mode here, and he gives a really fluid and laid-back solo. This guy's a really good guitarist. He can do like burning rock guitar solos, nice acoustic work, and also a completely, unique jazz guitar approach too. So he's a very versatile player. Track 8, Just Callin'. This is the one I'm not so sure. It's we think Just Called to Say I Love You.
Maybe, yeah.
That's not this
fast,
tune.
Yeah.
I just think this might be a tribute or something, but not a Stevie Wonder tune, because I can't think of or find any reference to it. But it's a cool tune. It starts with really fast unison melody lines between guitar and organ. Landum solos first and shows some real speed here while he keeps his fluid style. And listen to how everyone locks in with the drum, guitar, organ in perfect sync. There's a really tight trio. Bianchi's on fire with runs and trills in his solo here, and all the while he keeps up these super fast bass lines behind that. It's really off to the races here. Landum hits all the fills and kicks to encourage his solo, and then he gets some more fills between the return to the riff and unison melody. So it's a cool tune. I just don't think this is a Stevie Wonder tune. Correct me if I'm wrong, listeners, but where does this come from? If anyone has this album in the notes, it'd be cool to know. And the final one, track 9, Ribbon in the Sky, from the 1982 album Original Musiquarium. A cool word.
Oh, yeah.
Musiquarium.
I remember that. I thought this was a single, actually. It's from the album, huh?
Yes, from the album. Probably was released as a single, too. This one starts with snaking organ lines into chords with a dark tone over a really deep bass pedal. And it brings in the short solo organ feature. This is just organ alone here, so it's just a little over 2 minutes long. Bianchi plays a really funky bass line once he gets the tune going. There's some staccato and smooth chords mixed up behind the melody to give it some variety. Just when it gets going and sounds so cool, he fades it out. You want to just hear him keep going.
That drives me crazy, man.
Yeah.
Did you hear that also on the first track? That's just those two things just drove me crazy about this album.
Yeah, in
a bad way. Otherwise, I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, Bianchi's organ playing is really awesome. He's got great, technique, but he also has a really good concept of the sounds of the organ and where to use the variety in just the right spots. I really feel like he gets the most out of this instrument. And here, I think he's done something really interesting. As you said, these Stevie Wonder tunes kind of lend themselves to jazz, but he doesn't take the always obvious funky approach to them. He mixes them up. Like say, he doesn't give you what you might expect with Superstition. He turns some of the other tunes into swing without you even noticing it. At the same time as getting a lot of variety and some unexpected approaches to the arrangements, the melodies always come through really clear. And so anyone who knows Stevie Wonder's tunes will recognize them right away. So I think he does a good job balancing this sort of creative arrangement and sort of launching pad of tunes into something original and satisfying you with the melodies that are so familiar, because that's what I think at the end of the day, that's what made Stevie Wonder's music really great, was these memorable melodies and uplifting themes in there. So yeah, interesting approach.
Not only that, they're real songs too. I mean, they have complicated chords in them and chord progressions. The kind of things that were normal in great songwriting of the time. We don't really hear this anymore, unless he's doing it, I guess. But
yeah. So nice project, and really good unit too. I was really impressed by Bollenbeck's guitar virtuosity and flexibility to do lots of things.
And is that it?
No.
What? The audience wants an encore? What is that?
Well,
okay. What do you think, Russ? You want to give him an encore?
We just there was one more thing for organ, and I thought, well, why not? We'll just tack this on.
Yeah, this was pretty cool too. I really enjoyed hearing this. In fact, yeah.
And it's not the Dirty Dozen, but rather half of that. It's the Filthy Six.
Filthy Six.
Filthy Six.
Filthy is such like a British word too.
Yes.
So I tagged them as British right away.
Right, and to tag them more as British, the title of the EP, this is a 4-tune release, is called Soho Filth.
There you go.
And so their name comes from being formed in a dingy Soho basement 20 years ago. And they wanted to play classic soul jazz tunes with good grooves, as exemplified in the great Blue Note recordings of soul jazz. And so they worked around London's Soho, playing in jazz and R&B clubs, and eventually moved on to other kind of higher level establishments. And so they've been doing this focus on kind of soul jazz type things for 20 years. They've got a few
20 years,
out.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so this is their latest EP, Soho Filth, and this was recorded at Dean Street Studios. And this group features, I guess, the leader, Nick Etwell on trumpet, Mark Brown tenor saxophone, James Fenn on guitar. Now, I believe on the organ here is Andrew Noble, but looking through their material, they have some upcoming performances. I think they have someone named Pete Whitaker listed as organ. So I don't know if they've made personnel changes or it's just for the live dates, but I'm pretty sure here it's Andrew Noble, Daniel Drury on bass, Simon Lea on drums, and Mark Snowboy Cotgrove on congas.
What do you suppose he got that nickname?
I don't know. Snowboy.
Certain things come to mind, let me say.
Right. So we start out with a tune called Mr. Schmingle Bangle. And this is supposedly inspired by the music of Cannonball Adderley, great soul jazz. Well, not only that, everything from bebop and to soul jazz, alto saxophonist. This is a happy melody here that's introduced in the trumpet and sax over a samba beat. So the conga that Snowboy has going here adds to that. But it's one of those tunes that changes up to swing. So it goes from samba to swing and back again. And if you listen to the switch in the bass line, you'll pick that up. It's really cool. You got dum, 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 into the walking bass. So that's always cool. So Etwell's up first on trumpet. He plays melodic and fluid lines, but they have nice accents over both the Latin and swing sections. Some nice trumpet playing. Fenn is up next on guitar. And he sambas and swings also with some smooth lines and some cool moving fast triplet figures. And then the organ comes in and churns chords behind them, keeps the mood really bright. So it's a kind of uplifting, fun rhythmic tune to start things out. Track 2 is called Swapsies. It's a very British sounding name.
Right.
It's a kind of drum beat groove intro. Add funky guitar. Add organ, add horn riffs, and add cool breaks. Just the perfect recipe for some organ grooving, soulful tune. And I guess the Swapsy idea is it's just this based on kind of alternating chord pattern that does build up to a cadence, but it's that 2-chord kind of gets in this hypnotic thing here. Brown is up first for a dirty tenor sax solo, or should I say filthy, in a good way. Nobles comes up next on organ. He churns out some bluesy lines, choppy chords, some trills, just what you need on a tune like this. And Fenn gets a bluesy guitar solo, and he mixes up some chords and bends in his lines for good taste. So fun tune here as well. 3 is called In Time. It's an interesting tune. It's kind of a minor blues tune with some interesting harmonies, and it's got 8-beat feel, spreading out the beat with these cool syncopated bass lines. Fenn has a really groovy guitar solo here, and he gets some psychedelic type of bends and ideas in as well. And the organ is sort of purring along in the background, just waiting to erupt on something. Etwell gets an extended trumpet solo here too, and the focus is on kind of rhythmic ideas throughout. And then Noble finally gets some organ time. He starts out with a really straight tone before he gets some more shimmer into it, and then he really jams out with some intense lines as he goes through it. And then the horns trade phrases while they vamp out to the end. This is a very cool tune. And the short set of recordings here finishes with The Swagger Junkie. I guess this is supposed to be about the types of people that you can see walking around in Soho. It's a fun.
It's not about that snowball guy, anyway.
Yeah. The fun syncopated groove. This is reminds me of a Lee Morgan '60s kind of blue note tune that he would always have one of these kind of fun kind of melodies with a syncopated groove on his releases at that time, and it has this cool kind of rising climax line before the turnaround. And Etwell sounds really inspired on his trumpet solo here, and he gets in some Morgan-like licks over the rhythmic phrases here. Brown is next on tenor sax. He also keeps it funky, and then Noble gets an organ romp. Lots of rhythmic licks and some screaming lines in the upper register, too. He gets some more jamming, too, at the end over the horn lines. So it's a really good 60s groove style, funky fun. All these tunes are cool. They're just that really pleasing kind of soul jazz, funky things. I bet these guys would be a blast to see live. It would be a really good night of music. And
if you're listening, Filthy Six, come to Japan. We'll come and hear you.
I think they're on tour now, and I think they've gone international. I think they're going in the States. So I'd love to go see these guys.
Other groups, they reminded me a little bit about their channeling like a lot of these 60s funk groups, but there are other bands doing this too in America. Like they made me think a little bit of Lettuce, Lettuce, Lettuce from Boston, and Snarky Puppy to an extent, but they do something a little different.
Right.
But they're all groove oriented, groups like this, and I like this. I like this kind of thing. This is really an enjoyable night out. So
this is
very much worth a listen. This is great.
This is the kind of jazz I think it's very accessible. Anyone would like this because it's very rhythmic. It's got the
played at a party, everybody'd be into it.
Yeah, the appeal of the horn lines, really good rhythms, and that cool organ sound. Yeah, it's a good genre to mine. You're never going to run out of cool things to do with this sort of arrangement. So,
right.
Well, there you have it. There's your organic high. Enough organ releases to keep you held over.
Is that what we're calling the episode? Organic high?
It would be pretty good.
Organic something? We're going to call it, I don't know. Organic high is a good name, I think.
Organic high, I like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it sort of has lots of possible interpretations.
I sleep better when we have a name. I don't want to wake up in the morning, there's all this anxiety. You got to come up with a name.
Yeah, what else do we have? We got a mix of things. We've got British projects and melancholy things.
Today? Yeah, go for the organ is the main kind of thing on this, I think.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
We start out melancholy and then we get high.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a bad way to end.
Yeah.
Well, before we sign off, did you want to say anything about the Grammys? Or
do we? I don't know. Well, the classical Grammys, I'm thinking, last year we did a thing on the classical Grammys, and it was really rough because there are 8 categories. One of them is opera, and there was no way I was going to listen to 5 operas in the amount of time required. Not to mention, because if you're listening to an opera and you want to review it, you need the libretto, especially if you've never heard the opera before. Because they often nominate operas that aren't really well known. I was just so unimpressed by the classical picks this year. I thought that a lot of the recordings that we covered on this podcast were a lot better than the stuff that's been nominated. Although a lot of it I haven't heard, but I kind of, there are always surprises though. Last year we heard the Theophanidis concertos, and we thought that was really great. Right. So there might be something in there somewhere, and I guess I'll dig through it. But I don't really want to do an episode on it this year. But how about the jazz? What do you think? I mean, I liked a lot of the recordings, but again, you can predict who they're going to nominate. They're always the same people.
It's always the same people. It's always very American-centric, too.
And that's an issue. It's not as much an issue with jazz, because jazz being an American form, even though it's gone international. Yeah. But classical music its center is Europe, and it still is. And and to have like all these like American recordings only, it seems really crazy to me, because I think a lot of the best music is still coming out of Europe.
Yeah,
in classical music.
I certainly would like to see more variety of artists, and the same names year after year. It does get kind of tiring.
We were kind of hoping for a Mike Ledon nomination. He didn't get one. I was kind of disappointed by that. I thought that was a unique album. I figured we'll get him on the
pulling for that one. But well, we won't put too much effort into it this year, other than to contrast what we think are the more rewarding listening experiences.
We'll be giving you our picks of the year from the things we've covered on the last Sunday of the year. That'll be the 26th, 27th, whenever you get this podcast of December. Right. Yeah.
So I guess next week we'll have our regular episode, and then the following week we'll do our Christmas episode.
We've got a Christmas episode coming up. Going to recommend you some Christmas recordings. Yeah. In the meantime, start listening to Fabrizio Bosso's Christmas album, Merry Christmas Baby, and Joey DeFrancesco's Christmas album, Home for the Holidays. They're both fantastic.
Yeah. And you can pull out the old Jimmy Smith. Is it Cooking Christmas? Is that it?
Maybe, yeah. Cooking or Christmas Cooking or something. I can't remember.
Something like that. Yeah. Can't go wrong with that one. They've got big band and organ, so you can start with those. And I just can't. I can't start yet because I'll get burnt out on Christmas tunes too soon. So you have to wait 2 weeks for our list.
So we're going to cover like recent, like new Christmas albums from this year. But I want to recommend two more jazz ones that I really love from recent years. One of them is Holidays and Holly Nights by the Lawrence Juber Trio. He's a guitarist.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah,
I know that. That's excellent. That's on my list every year. And Christmas Tidings by Pittsburgh-based pianist Rick Gallagher, which I love too.
Oh, I think I have that one too. I borrowed that one.
Yeah, you have that one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah,
those are two that are on my list every year, so I recommend those four that I mentioned as instrumental ones. And of course, the Diana Krall one is always fantastic too, called Christmas Songs. And then there's a new one I think we're going to get to this year. I'm not going to mention it yet. We'll wait.
Yeah, I've got a few. We've dredged up a few. You know, they start coming out in October. And I don't want to listen to them yet. I just put them on the list.
but one of them I had to hear because I like the artist so much. So I've already heard it a few times. So I'm a bit like that. See, my Christmas starts earlier than yours. I start after November 22nd because that's St. Cecilia's Day, and I feel like after that the festivities start. So
I do a sort of two-tiered approach. After Thanksgiving, I listen to one or two, and once December comes in, then I'll be able to listen to them, So,
although we are recording on November 28th, and this is the first Sunday of Advent, so the Christmas season has started
officially. That's right.
Yeah, officially.
Yeah. So that's what's coming up, but we'll get one more episode of recent releases in before we get to something outside of the normal schedule of.
Yeah, no problem. Programs. It'll still be new recordings, though.
Yeah, it'll still be new recordings. That's right.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to go for something that came out in December last year, but there'll be other things from this year, too. So,
wow. It's like, what are you going to do? You can only you can only listen to these kind of recordings for a little bit of time. And then
if you miss it, you got to go. You got to wait till next year to talk about it.
That's right. Yeah. All right. So lots of good things coming up before the end of the year here on Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. This has been episode 39.
Oh, we're almost at 40. Just almost next week, huh?
Next week will be that big 40. That's right. Yeah. So we'll be around next week. Again, please do follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and contact us if you have any questions, comments at adultmusicpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com. And we'll be back again with episode 40 and 6 new recent releases next week.